Hey there, everyone. Welcome to A Slice of Life with Kellie and Jon. And today we have a special guest, Annette Fix. She is a writer and a writing coach, correct? An author and a
Yeah.
coach.
Memoir, yes, specifically memoir. So,
And I'm sorry, excuse me. My
bless you.
allergies are horrible. Um, okay, so memoir. So you sent us a little bio, and I've got some questions here. A memoir is your biography by you, and a biography is by someone else, or no? What's a memoir?
Memoir, and for anybody that doesn't know, is a lot of people confuse memoir with autobiography.
Yeah.
Autobiography takes a look at your life from, birth, spanking on the hiney, all the way through, they're putting you under the ground. So a memoir actually is a period of time, usually thematically based, that's like a snippet of your life, that the whole entire story is that portion of your life. So,
Okay. Okay, and it's
That's
got some kind of deep meaning to
well,
the
well,
person.
a lot of times it does have, yeah, it does have various different themes. And I'll talk a little bit more about universal themes later, and that's really what makes it resonate with people.
Okay.
Because although your story may be different than anybody else's experience, the core universal themes of love and loss and, things like that, everybody can relate to that. So even if they're not coming from the same place you are, nor having the same experiences, that universal theme is what touches your readers.
right.
Okay.
Absolutely. Well, Kelly, just like my first book is a memoir. It's the title of it is The Boss Always Sits in the Back,
Okay.
colon, a memoir. Well, actually, an ellipse, and a memoir, and that's it. It's a
A part
slice
of your
of
life.
my life
A slice of
that
life.
yeah, there you go.
Okay.
That meant something, and like she said, it has all of those parts in it. And in mine, they always liked to use a young man comes of age. You know, oh. Yeah, one more time. But you have to have your arcs and all of those other wonderful things that make it an interesting story. But just like Annette said, everybody has to relate to it somehow. Mine certainly was unique in itself as to what I did and the guys I did it with. But what made it popular amongst people is that I was very specific about the timeline, and during the timelines of these years that all this happened, historic things that had taken place so that people could put themselves at that place or remember that time or remember who they were with or when they heard that song by the Dell Vikings or something like that. So that's what she means by a memoir as opposed to an autobiography.
Mhm.
There you go. Just to throw my book in there, and now I'll shut up. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I was absolutely going to bring up your book because one of the things that a lot of people also are a little bit intimidated by memoir is they think they have to have this grand story. Yours is based on, a mob family that you were related to and how that played out in your life. Some people look at their lives and they go, I don't have any interesting stories and I don't really have anything to write about. They do. That actually is one of my memoir philosophies is there are no stories that are too small. My memoir, The Breakup Diet, was literally about a relationship breakup and me kind of going through sort of processing it. And that initially, I had no intention of writing a memoir. I was working with a producer at television producer who was working with me on a script for a family feature for Disney. And I had this relationship breakup that ended up happening, and I was so rocked by it, I started journaling. A friend of mine read the journal and she was like, "Oh my God, this is hysterical. You should write this as a book." And I'm like, "You think?" So all of a sudden I went down that rabbit hole and I had no idea whether it was going to be, 900 horrible dating stories or what would end up happening. But it ended up being, and I'll flash it, The Breakup
Yeah.
Diet,
How
and
cute. And what a
and
good whatever little theme you came up with. So is it helpful? Is it just about your story and the pain you went through and cathartic, or is it with tips for other people to how to survive a breakup?
It's not actually a how-to book. It is a memoir.
Okay.
Although I have gotten a lot of feedback from readers that are like, I felt like you were telling the story of what happened with my ex-boyfriend and how I felt and that sort of thing. And the arc in it is from, pretty much page one, I get dumped over the phone by the guy I lived with,
Oh,
who
wow.
he was a golf pro. And anyway, so it's all in the book. And then it was the process of, okay, how do you kind of unpack this? We lived together,
Right.
so then he's got to come and get his stuff and just the whole process of me going, okay, getting over this. And you go through the Kubler-Rossian process of, grief, and it's in the book. My voice, though, is what the agent said is, and the editors, Simon Schuster, were like, it's chick lit. We need to publish this as chick lit. And I'm like, but it's true. It was very much kind of a Bridget Jones Diary sort
Mhm.
of, tone to it. And I didn't want to have it published as a novel because I'm like, but it's got a happily ever after and it's true. I want people to be able to believe that, yeah, anybody can write a true or a fiction and make the ending happy. But if it actually happened in real life, that may give some people some hope that, okay, I've, lost the one, but you hadn't even met the one yet. So
New
that's
one.
kind of another one.
Um, yeah, and I'm sure just if someone's reading your story, like you said, other people relate to it, and that's cathartic for them just to know somebody else went through this and they
Right.
survived. And
Came out
you
the other
said they have a
side.
happy
Yeah.
ending, and you used humor. It sounds like you used some humor.
There was a lot of humor in it. That's
Okay.
just naturally the way I write. So although there were some scenes that were pretty sad, most of it was very kind of sarcastic look at, dating and, trying to put yourself back out there. And there were a lot of, and at the time I was also a single mother and working as an exotic dancer, but trying to become a writer. So there are a lot
Oh,
of
wow.
elements to it
Yeah.
that give it a little bit of depth, and it also gives readers an insight into lives that they maybe not, haven't experienced themselves. What is it like working in a club like that? That sort of thing. So yeah, that's one of the things with people that are writing their memoir. I'd like them to take a look at their lives and realize that, okay, maybe they do live on a farm in Iowa, but there are people in New York City that have never even seen an animal in real life. So hearing, and you've got somebody maybe on a farm in Iowa that has never been to these, glitzy parties in New York City, and
Right.
you know don't know what the sounds and smells and life on the, subway or going down the street,
Yeah.
are. So bringing all of these elements into your memoir gives people the opportunity to kind of step into a life that they haven't experienced before.
I
So
love that. So you're a coach. You help other people write their
yes.
memoir.
Yeah, yeah, and I get so invested in the stories and helping people just draw that out of them. There's one friend that I'm working with now. I absolutely adore her. I'm so excited that she's doing this. She's 85, and she is finally going to put some of her life stories down on the page. And they're fascinating, they're funny, they're interesting. And it spanned, a good period of time. That's 85 years of our
Yeah.
history. So that also shows you what things were like in different periods as her, her as a woman going through these stages of her life and that sort of thing. So yes, I had another client that I was working with who her story is her family immigrated from Cuba during the revolution. So that is, three generations of women in her family. It was a matriarchal family that ran everything in Cuba and, came across in a boat to the United States. And so yeah, I just love personal stories.
Yeah.
I get,
Yeah, and everyone really does have a story. I
Mhm.
feel like,
Yeah.
the celebrity era of the 80s and the 90s and everybody worshiping celebrities and everything. And I think now people are like, no, wait, I have a story. I want to share my story. It's become more, the internet has given everybody a platform to be the celebrity or whatever. They've got influencers and everything, but everybody's deserving of having people hear their story.
Yes, yes. There's a few different levels of it that I look at and try to help people take a look at. Is like, okay, owning your life story. There was a woman who she grew up in a hoarder family. So, and she got a little
What kind of family? Hoarder?
hoarder. Yeah, her
Where they
mother was,
hoard things?
yeah, her mother was an extreme
Okay.
hoarder, and the house, had covers over the windows so people couldn't see in, and her life outside of, her going to high school and everything else was really extreme living in this household. And as she was working on her memoir, she was getting bogged down in looking into like the psychology behind it. And the thing that I was, talking to her about and trying to get her to realize is, okay, psychologists can, write about the mental workings of, people who have that issue that they're dealing with. But that doesn't mean that they will ever be able to explain what it was like living in that home
Right, right.
and the feelings that you had of living in that home. So absolutely
Right.
owning your personal experiences and putting it out there, because there are other people that are living in that, kind of a situation right now and are maybe ashamed of it, or,
Mhm.
don't think anybody else is experiencing it the way they do. So having these stories out there, it's just like it's a universal way to connect people through story. I mean, the story has been like a foundation of our lives back from when they're carving things on the wall in the caves. Story is life. That's my thought on it. The other thing too is people need to write about this moment in history. And when I say this moment, there are so many things that we've experienced. Okay, perfect example. 9/11. There were a couple of memoirs that I want to contrast from 9/11. One was written by a first responder who was running in, trying to deal with,
Mhm.
everything that was coming undone. And it was his story of the things that he saw and what he experienced, and even the health, issues he had after that. There was another memoir that was written by a Muslim girl, and the kind of blowback that she received
Mhm.
after 9/11 and the things that she had to deal with, all of the people blaming her. I mean, she was a kid. She had
Right.
nothing to do with what happened, but it
Mhm.
was her story of what happened after 9/11 with her just trying to exist as a Muslim American.
Yeah, how it affected
So
her.
so the contrasts of these stories, everybody has a story from their perspective.
Yep.
And I think it's so important to write it. Like even the pandemic that we've all, not all of us managed to live through, but the people who did live through it, everybody went through the same storm, but not in the same boat.
Yep.
Everybody had their
Yep.
experiences. Some people lost businesses, some people lost family,
Yeah.
and looking back at history, these are the stories that need to be told. Otherwise, the only thing that there's going to be is whatever person decides
This
to
is
write it.
history. It's
Well, they're
history.
going to write it in a history book, and somebody is going to decide what the general
Yeah.
uh, story is that isn't going to touch on so many of the actual
Oh,
personal stories of the
yeah.
things that
I
happen.
never thought of it that way. Somebody, maybe it would be you, could get a book, let's say 911, compose a book of 20 different stories from 20 different perspectives of people,
Yeah.
where they were that day. The one that missed the airplane, I think Mark Wahlberg's the one that was, missed that plane. He was supposed to be on one of the planes. The people that, were related to the people that were on the planes, the people that were related to somebody that, anyway, you could get 20 different people and 20 different perspectives, and that would be a basically a history of
Yes,
911, put it
absolutely.
together in any tragic time in our history. That would be
It,
really an interesting way to
it,
approach it.
it makes me, I wish I had the story. I'm sure it's probably somewhere in storage in my old notes and stuff. But I remember I was in college, and I had a history teacher who had all of us sit down, and we were going to write the story from the perspective of, and we could choose whether we wanted to be, the plantation owner or the wife of the plantation owner or a house slave or a field slave. And I'm thinking, I ended up choosing the house slave. Okay, what does a white girl know anything about that? Zero. And I bet if I read that story now, it would be so cringeworthy of me trying to imagine what it must have been like.
Right.
But I didn't read, I didn't have and wasn't exposed to any stories of what it really was like. That's why it is so important, like, to get the culture stories out, the race stories out, the identity stories out.
Even families, like through the family generational writing stories of, because, so many families are dysfunctional, if not all of them have some form of dysfunction. I mean, something. And, documenting that, the family history. And I think it's cathartic, and it also helps the future generations to learn from it and not repeat the past, break the cycles.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I would like to see happen. I mean, in my perfect world, it would be people documenting history from their perspective, and they can tell their own personal stories. Actually, in the Breakup Diet, there is a section about 9/11 because that portion of my story happened with that boyfriend. We were, at a condo in Palm Springs and got a call from his friend on the phone that was like, "You need to turn on the TV." So we sat there on the edge of the bed watching everything unfolding on TV and just sobbing, going, what, is going on? And so even if history is wrapped up in your personal story, it needs to be put on the page. I mean, those are things that, and I still think back about and I don't know what history teachers you had, but the history teachers I had told me that George Washington's teeth were made of wood. Sorry. No, they weren't made of wood. They were made of like teeth that were pulled from the slaves of mouths or mouths of slaves without anesthesia. So a lot of people don't know that because that's not in the history books. So how are history revisionists going to write what's going on now?
That's a very good point, because one group is writing our history, whereas if everybody wrote their perspective of the history, we'd have a better a more realistic view of real history.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I never thought of that. I love that. I think that's important.
I feel like it's super important for people to get their stories out, even if they never publish it. Although I'm also a big fan of going, okay, I mean, personally, as a small publisher, I can pull a Library of Congress number, and whatever's published is going to be in the Library of Congress for indefinitely.
Yeah.
So those are stories that historians, whoever, going looking for, documentation about a particular period, it needs to be in there. It needs to be the voices of all of the people, and then when you do look at stories like, say, identity stories, you've got so many people in the LGBTQIA, community, that if they told their stories, then people who are, young and just beginning to realize that maybe their, gender is not what they, feel it is. They have stories of people that have already gone before them, that have gone through the process of talking to their family about it and talking to their friends about it, and the experiences that they've had. I mean, it's all so important. I mean, yeah. So
and that's how
on my soapbox about memoir, I will constantly.
No, I think the word is important. I think it's very important that everybody, I mean, who has time to sit down and write their memoir, but if somebody was able to take every period of time and gather 20 to 50 different stories from that period of time, that would be a more accurate history book to study from than one person writing it. And it's usually from their slant. Like they say, the winner of the war is the one that writes the story.
Yes. That's exactly what bothers me.
And even if it's not intentional to leave things out, it's not helpful to not understand someone else's completely 180 degrees perspective.
Right.
I mean, that's what America is supposed to be. And I know we're so divisive right now, but we have to start embracing everybody's point of view. I
Yeah,
mean, even if
everybody's
you feel like
story.
you've been left out, then we need to bring you in. We need to help make everybody feel heard on both sides. So yeah, I think this is a very important thing that you're doing. So how do you go about this? How do you find clients?
Usually, I mean, I have occasionally had people that have either read my book and come to me, or I've run across them organically. I have a dog that has mast cell cancer, and I reached out to a woman who owns a regenerative farm, and they do CBD and THC products. And I was looking for something topical and ended up chatting with her, and she saw she went to my website, saw what I did, and said, I feel like we're supposed to be talking. She was the one with the Cuba story that I was telling you about. So
Yeah.
I sometimes come across people and they're like, can you help me write this? And I'm like, absolutely. That's one of the things and the other thing too about memoirs, a lot of people who may feel like they're not writers, you don't have to be a writer to tell your story. And the thought of, okay, the memoir needs to be, with the arc and everything, people can also do it as a collection of short stories. So if they say, oh, I don't know, I don't have enough to put into a full book. Oh, absolutely, you do. Just tell one story at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody is looking to begin figuring out what they want to write, there's a few different ways I recommend doing it. One is start with a timeline. Well, first, go gather materials. If you've got a journal, grab your journals. If you've got pictures, grab pictures, any old letters, that sort of thing, and sit down and just start going through and making a timeline of memories that you've got. And there may be something within those memories where you go, you know what? I really want to tell this story about the best friend I had, and the kind of relationship we had and the ups and downs, so then their memoir ends up becoming about friendship. Well, friendship's a universal thing that, again, a theme that people can relate to. So yeah, stories, lots of stories.
So do you have, like, for someone who's a non-writer, do you have a formula for them, like an outline to help them to get started? I know you're saying the timeline, but is there
Well,
anything else?
timeline's one of them. I have a couple of PDFs if anybody that's, watching, listening
Oh
is
yeah,
if
you
they're
sent
interested.
those to
Yeah,
us. And
yeah.
is it okay to post them then?
Yeah, those links go to the sites where the people can download them.
Okay.
One is basically the 5 steps to get
Mhm.
started with your memoir today. The other one is 123 universal themes. And one of the things that I have my clients do is sit down with the list of the 123 universal themes and start looking at the different themes and just writing a little sentence beside it of memories that come up when they think about these themes. And all of a sudden, the memories become stories, and the stories build out, and they find some connection between things. And the client I was working with who had her Cuba story, she realized that her basic theme in her story was freedom. Freedom from where they came from to where they came to. And that was the general direction that all of the stories that she was compiling, had the through line for. So
Yeah, I'm looking at your 5 steps. That's helpful. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because a
So
lot of people just don't know even where to start. They don't know
right,
where to
right. And
begin.
it's a lot easier than you might think. And as long as you just take little bites at a time, start, putting it together, it will, the people who have the journals, they're already, many steps ahead. Grab one of your old journals, start reading it. It will take you right back into your mindset at the time, your experiences. You were going to say something, John?
Well, yeah, I didn't want to interrupt what you were saying, but it reminds me of something in one of these things like, where do you start?
Mhm.
And I'm so sure that Annette will agree with me. I'll go forward and say this. See, we are very fortunate in that we are not ancient civilizations where if we have a story to tell, we got to carve it into a.
Well, John, your sound is out.
Is that back?
Yeah.
Yep, you're
There you
back.
are.
Sorry. Okay, we didn't have to carve this thing in a rock, or we do not have to dip a feather into a thing of ink and write something, and then we're like three-quarters of the way through a page and we screw it up. And geez, okay, and you gotta get another page, and or like the next day you think of a better thing to put in one of those paragraphs. So now you gotta rewrite that whole page all over again, and it just goes on and on and on. And then eventually it got so that we could have this typing thing that we could type our thing. But even though I made a mistake, or I got to do this page over, and it would drive you nuts. But we are now in the 21st century.
Mhm.
And I tell everybody, because I do seminars from time to time for seniors in high schools
Mhm.
and freshmen in college, where they ask the same question: where do I start? The cool part is with computers, specifically, I use a Word document. You can write any part of your story that you want. Just get it out of your head. Make room for all these other stories that are in there. Get this story out, this one that you always want to tell. Save it in a file. Boom.
Well, you
Write
can
another.
even get a tape recorder and just speak
That's-
into it, and then it'll transpose. Into,
Yeah,
I have my digital tape.
you don't even have to type
I
it.
you
chat.
know, all you need actually is an app on your phone.
There you
So,
go. So
that-
you could take all of these files. You don't have to write them in a linear fashion. You can tell that story in whatever memory you
Whatever
have
yeah,
time.
comes to.
Save it, and then when you're ready to put all these pieces together, I always talk about with my book, The Boss, what I thought was going to be chapter one. When I first got there and typed into my little laptop computer what I thought would be the beginning of chapter one. It was great until I realized in chapter three, wait a minute, I can't tell this story until I tell a backstory. So that's got to go before chapter one. So that happened so many times in the writing of the book that what is now chapter five started as chapter one
Mhm.
of the boss. I kept having to go back, and if I was going to tell this other story on page 43, I had to tell what that was about in an early chapter.
You have to set it up.
And it's so great to have technology at our fingertips that we could do that now. You don't have to write it. I was born on blah, 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 and then take it from there. It could be slivers of that piece of your life, or as I would put it, slices of the piece of your life, and just save it and then put those pieces together. There you go.
Mhm.
That's what I was.
Yeah, I've got a few different ways that I recommend people kind of decide, and that's one of the things the 5 steps PDF walks them through choosing how they're going to begin recording their stories, whether they are going to do it from, recording something into an app or a voice memo type.
Mm-hmm.
Lose my words today. Whether they're going to do a voice memo, something, whether they want to even grab 3x5 cards and write down, where it was, what time, how old they were, what period of their life it was, a little snippet about who was in it, that sort of thing, and collect all of them. Because from some older people that may not be tech savvy, they may want to do it by writing in, notebooks or note cards, or they may want to, try typing. I know a couple that they don't type, so they want to write the stuff out by hand, so that's an option for them as well. Just any way you can start getting the stories on the page.
Yeah.
Do my note cards. That one of the things that you can do if you do start taking little bits of it for if you're on the run, you've got moms that are like, okay, I'm in, pickup line, and I just had an idea for one of the stories. Grab a note card, write it down. And when I say note card, it can also be just the notes app in your phone.
Notebook.
Yeah,
Or
well, it could be a
or-
note. Yeah, it
yeah.
could be a notebook. It could be 3x5 cards. It could be the notes app in your phone.
Yep.
It could be the recording, app in your phone. It can be anything that you can do to get it onto the page.
Yeah.
And with the recording, you don't have to do the transcribing because there are apps for that as well. Otter AI is one of them. And actually, if you even use like Chat GPT, you can have, all of the stuff typed up as and ask them to fix the grammar on it.
I just
know.
did that yesterday with something for work.
Yeah,
I put something in there. It was a press release. I put the information in and asked Chat GPT to fix it up into a story, a press release.
right, right. Yeah, I had one client who is actually using it to, she'll tell the story. She goes, I don't feel like I'm a very good writer. So she'll ask it, okay, well, can you fix this sentence and, make it funny or whatever. And she's using it. This is something she doesn't want to publish it, but she wants to be able to leave this for her children. Because once she passes, the stories of her matriarchal family, from Cuba, the stories are lost. When she passes, they'll be done because it's stories of her mother and her grandmother. So that have been passed down. So
Yeah, I just heard someone say the other day, within 3 generations, you might as well not have even existed because you're forgotten.
yeah,
Like
the
you're
story.
gone. Nobody, the kids of the kids of the kids don't remember you. Great, great, great grandma, you're gone. But if you write a book or a memoir, you
It,
can last forever. You'll be around
yes,
forever.
yes.
So that's a really good point too. So yeah, now I think everybody should write a book. Everybody should
I
write a
think they
story.
should. I mean, I'm the first one that will, I'm like, as soon as I hear somebody's story, I'm like, you should write that as a book. They're like, no. And I'm like, yes, no, you need to.
Yeah, even if you
Yeah.
just leave it behind for family, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, see, and the other thing too, one of the my 85-year-old friend who's writing her story, she's not married, she doesn't have any kids, but her stories are fabulous, so she needs to put a stake in the ground and say, I was here and this was my
Yeah.
life. This
Yeah.
was what I experienced. These are the things that are important to me. And I'm encouraging her to put absolutely everything into it. You got favorite recipes, put your family favorite recipes in there. You have, moments in history that you experienced,
Yeah.
she's probably going to do it as a, series of short stories, throughout various different chapters of her life. But yes, put it all in there. I mean,
What a better way to spend your time than watching a reality TV show, going to a library of stories of Americans, just American lives or whatever. If somebody, put together a website with, just American lives of all the people, everybody that wanted to write this memoir, this book. I'm giving you some ideas, Annette. Um,
oh, trust me, I have enough of those.
yeah, not enough time to do them all. Yeah,
Exactly.
I composed a book called The Tales of the Lioness, and it was about women. It was 19 stories of women who had overcome great obstacles
Mhm.
or, had something encouraging to say that had been through something.
Mhm.
Some were really horrible, tragic things, and some were, nice stories. But yeah, and it gave some of these women, one woman lost a child to drugs, and it just gave her such a release. It was so cathartic for her and meant so much. And another woman, her family just got tired of hearing it. Like she needed to vent. She needed to talk about, she had a brain aneurysm and she just needed to talk about it. And seeing that, oh, I choke up thinking about this because seeing that in writing her story meant so much to her.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I love that you're doing that. And what else do you have going on? So what are you currently doing?
I'm going to take a sort of detour and talk about because it has to do related to what I'm working on right now
Okay.
is stunt memoir. I don't know if you're familiar with what stunt memoir is. Stunt memoir, the two most famous ones that you'll probably recognize right off was Eat, Pray, Love, and another one was Julie and Julia. That was the one where the woman Julie spent a year cooking through Julia Child's The Art of French Cooking. And it's a stunt memoir is usually about a year where someone takes like kind of a life experiment. Shonda Rhimes did one called The Year of Yes, where she decided I think it was her sister or a good friend who had told her, you know, you never say yes to anything, you always say no. So she decided, okay, this year of my life, I'm going to say yes to absolutely everything that
Wow.
I would normally said no to, you know. And she wrote about that. There was a guy who wrote a book called The Year of Living Biblically, where he decided to live every single day as if, you know, just basically straight out of the Bible, you know, and he was going to follow that for a year. There was a woman who wrote a book called Our Black Year, where she wanted to kind of mobilize her community and only shop from, you know, Black owned like retailers and, you know, and shop owners and that sort of thing, to kind of give a boost to her community, but also just put a stake in the ground for it, you know.
Mhm.
And I love the idea of stunt memoirs, so I am actually working on one myself.
Awesome. Are you going to share the topic with us, or
Um,
is it a surprise later?
Kind of vaguely. Well, I mean, actually, the breakup diet ended up being, it was a stunt memoir as well, because when I started it, it was okay, I got dumped. I don't know where this is going. And, you know, and I ended up having to cut some stories out when I was working with the editor at Simon and Schuster. She's like, okay, I want to see more of the son character, and I want to see, you know, maybe not so many guys you're dating. But it was me trying to figure out where I'm going, what I'm doing. And the stunt memoir I'm working on currently is kind of a post-pandemic sort of, where do we go from here? You know, it's you know,
Okay.
midlife kind of postmenopausal, you know, empty nested, divorced. Okay, what's next? Sort of experiment
I'm
to
sure a lot of women can relate to that.
to try, just try on some things and see where it goes, and to write about it as I'm, you know, going through the process. So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, you just inspired me. Not that I have any time to write anything, but I had three stories in my book, The Tales of the Lioness. I wrote three of them about, you know, periods in my life. Two were tragic. Well, they were all tragic. But they had, one of them had a happy ending. But anyway,
Even the happy endings sometimes don't stay that way. My book, The Breakup Diet, ends with, you know, the banner flying over the lake of my husband asking me to marry him. Keyword was bend. So my happily ever after looks a little different now. So,
yeah.
but yeah, so stories
I'm
change, and
notice that I'm keeping my mouth shut.
well, see, here's the thing. There's going to be a book following up with that, of the next portion of my life, which is yeah, that was an experience. Yeah, that was an experience. So
Real happen.
yep, exactly. And I think everybody needs to write them, because
Yep.
the stories are so important. You know.
Yeah, and I think it's when you write and you write about your own life, you're examining your behavior too, your own behavior. So it's a part of like a self-awareness thing, which I don't think people have a lot of. And Lord knows there's been plenty of times I didn't. But when I look back and I sit and I think, you know, what was my part in this? Oh, this
Yes.
was a horrible, awful time. He's so horrible. But what did I do to allow it, to bring it on, to contribute? You know, so you always
Mhm.
have to look at your part in things, even if it's just that you put yourself in a position that maybe you shouldn't have.
Yeah.
So I think writing is a good for that too. Good for self-awareness.
Yeah, it definitely, as you're working through and kind of unpacking everything, and nothing says it ever has to be published for anybody else's, you know,
Yeah.
consumption, but I still think everybody should write their stories, especially their heart stories, the things that they really feel like they need to put onto the page.
Yep.
You know, and when I say heart story, it doesn't necessarily have to be all love and roses and, you know, rainbows and unicorn farts and things like that. It can be the tough stuff.
Mm.
One of the memoirs I am working on is a narcissistic abuse memoir
Oh.
from a previous relationship. Yes,
Oh.
but with it, I want to be able to answer the question, why didn't she just leave?
Mm-hmm.
Because as in my 20s, was working as a 911 operator for the LA County Sheriff's Department. And I remember getting a call in a situation where there was a domestic abuse, and domestic violence situation. And in my, whatever, my long 23 years of life, I was like, why don't you just leave? You know, and until you're in a situation
Yeah.
where,
It's so much more complicated.
it's so much more complicated, and maybe you don't even see it coming, and you get in so deep with it that it's hard to get back out of it, both, mentally, emotionally, that sort of thing. So, yeah, so a big part of that story that needs to be written is I'm hoping that it will open up some conversation, maybe in book clubs, about women that will be going, okay, I recognize this, happening with my daughter, or, I think my friend is in a relationship that's starting to look like this, or, the guy I'm dating is doing these sorts of things, just a way to help people maybe find their way out, and see what it looks like from the inside. So again, it comes down to just owning your life experiences and putting them down on the page.
Yeah, I was going to say human beings are so complicated. We're so psychologically complicated. We have mental issues. We have bad habits, abusive habits. And I don't think we study enough, of each other and ourselves. Yeah, I think actually I'm convinced now everybody should keep a journal.
Mhm.
Everybody should just write down their feelings every day. Just write it down. Keep some kind of journal. So
Yep.
anyway,
Journaling, just taking a look at your day, and even if it starts out like a gratitude journal where you're looking at
yeah.
things in your life going, I'm grateful I have this. I mean, I may not be where I want to be in life, but I'm grateful for the things I do have, because then you're looking around going, okay, maybe it's, not happening as easily for, well, like what's happening on the East Coast right now after the most recent hurricane.
Yeah.
There are people whose lives have completely been upended, turned upside down, and now they don't have food, electricity, they have no place to live, you know. And I hate to say these are stories, but these are stories that
Oh
absolutely
yeah.
need to
Oh
be
yeah.
written.
Yeah.
And there are some memoirs out there about, that huge tsunami that happened years ago, about what ended up happening with, there's a Sandy Hook memoir as well. So all of these things, it just, people need to tell their stories.
You're right. I'm thinking so many times of so many stories and events and um that I've been through, people I know, things they've been through, watching some horrible thing happen and what it did to you psychologically. Because the older we get, the more fearful we become because we've seen more tragedy. And how do we keep our youthful willingness to try new things um, without putting ourselves in danger and learn to put that fear aside. Because that's what I think I'm pretty okay with that. Like I've always been pretty fearless. And sometimes I look at it and I'm like, gosh, nobody else would at this point, a lot of people would have just thrown in the towel or whatever.
Mhm.
But examining how we grow. And then there's been times where I've been very stifled. Things have happened and they really stifled me for a long time until I could overcome it. And you look back and you're like, God, I wasted all those years on something that was irrational. Even,
Mhm.
my irrational fear of spiders. I mean, everybody's scared of spiders, or most people are, but like I am crazy about it. I have a spray bottle of Lysol everywhere in every room of my house because it really kills spiders really easily. At arm's length, there's like 5 of them in this room because I'm so scared of spiders. I just they give me the creeps. And that's irrational, it's crazy. People come into my house, it's all nice and neat and clean. They're like, "What's with all the Lysol everywhere? Are you, clean freak?" I'm like, "No, scared of spiders."
I have a designated spider cup. It is a tall, like slippery inside cup. And when I find a spider, I put the cup over it. I slide it till the spider gets into the bottom of it. I spin it around a little bit and I take the spider outside and toss it where it should be. So
You're nicer than I am. I kill them and I feel terrible about it. I really do. I talk to them. I'm like, "You should not have come in here. I can't help it." But I just kill them. I'm like, I'm not getting close to you because this
Yeah.
sprays pretty far. So like, no. Anyway, but yeah, it's irrational. And I'm just, kind of using that as one example of if we, maybe if I wrote about it and wrote, wrote about the cute little spider, and he's just trying to live his life, and, I might have more of a heart about killing bugs. I don't know. But I do think writing is very cathartic and helpful with self-awareness, which I'm big on self-awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
Well,
Yeah.
thanks for the encouraging words, and anybody in our audience may be able to get a hold of you. We'll put your website up and everything and all the information. And I think everyone should write a memoir.
Yes, absolutely. They
To
should
leave
get your
behind.
stories out there, get them onto the page. It is
Absolutely.
so important.
Yep.
So,
Yep. Leave your legacy. Leave something behind.
yes. Yes. Put your stake in the ground for your experience here on Earth. So,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for sharing this with us, Annette, and we really appreciate your
for having
time. And
me on. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, if anybody is interested in telling their story and needs a little bit of help, feel free to reach out.
yes, we will encourage that. And if you come up with something new and you want to share it with us and come back, we'd love to talk to you again.
Okay. Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Take care, Annette. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All views expressed in this video belong to Kellie Nicholson, Jon D'Amore, and guests. These discussions do not represent the opinions of any entity whatsoever with which they have been affiliated now or will be in the future. The opinions expressed are solely theirs, and since they are critically thinking human beings, these views are subject to change, subject to revision, and subject to rethinking at any time. These conversations are not meant to be taken as advice and are only for the purpose of entertainment. All statements may be based on hearsay and not necessarily valid proof of any claims in this video. It is not our intention to teach or advise on any topic. Unless otherwise noted, all photos are public domain. Thanks for watching A Slice of Life with Kellie and Jon.